Hey folks, it's Bear Gardener, and this is another of my videos in preparation for the very exciting expansion that is going to be Covert Operations. This one's actually prompted by one of the moderators on my Discord and a good friend of mine, and probably one of one of my biggest supporters since I started streaming content on here. And also one of those people who got in touch with me and was really kind about how useful my content had been to them. So anyway, Von Squirty, who you will possibly have seen on Discord, and certainly if you've been on my streams, who was kind enough to take up the mantle of being one of the mods on my new Discord, dropped an idea for a piece of content that he thought would be really useful, and I was prompted enough by it that I just snapped onto, I've got to go do this, because this is extremely useful for me. Pointed out that new players may be finding this whole build up to the expansion quite complex and overwhelming, and I've done some videos on things like what is rotation and what cards are going and what cards are coming in and given opinions. But he prompted me with some questions about being prepared the best way you can be as a new or newer player for the drop of a new expansion like this. And I thought, this is pretty cool. So I'm just going to take the questions that he's got and give you my opinions. Now, these are just going to be the best answers I've got. No one's perfect, but I'm going to give you the best advice I think I can. So let's hop over and take a look. So these are slightly shortened versions of the questions that were prompted. And I'm going to address them just as we go. So the first question that was propped up is gold and wild cards. Do we save them or spend them? And this is very much, but from a new player's perspective, what should I be doing right now? All these new cards are going to be landing, and I've got wild cards potentially from crate and gold that I've been saving up. But do I save up to buy packs, or should I be growing my collection now? Which is the stronger choice? So this is not as easy a question to answer as I wish it were. But I'll give you some base advice and then let you make the decision that makes, I think, the most sense for you. So when a new expansion like this drops, there are inevitably going to be cards in that expansion that end up being quite strong and seeing a lot of play. We certainly saw this with Winter War, and therefore there can be a lot of value in being able to gain access to those cards. But, and this is quite a big but, it does depend on your existing collection size and how much of a foundational collection you have as to whether you can actually take advantage, because many cards are interactive and not very rarely are you going to get a card that is just on its own insane good and just totally worth it. It does happen. 20 Panzer Grenadier fits that from Winter War, and still, even after a nerf, fits that criteria, but it's not a common occurrence. So the first thing I would say is take a look at how comfortable you feel you are with the size of what you have available. Do you feel like you have a good enough number of cards available that you can carry on playing and could afford to save up gold and wild cards and not fall behind? The second thing I would say is to separate the two. Wild cards, in my opinion, are such a potent and useful resource that I would almost certainly, unless there is something I really, really urgently need before the next expansion, and that's very unlikely given that we're coming to the end of the month and then by the 11th we're going to have the new expansion drop, highly unlikely that there's anything you need badly enough that I would advise spending a wild card on it. I would husband those so that you can pick and choose particular cards, especially if some drop that turn out to be like auto includes or big play cards. Gold-wise, that's a little bit more flexible. I still think it's worth having some saved up to crack open a few packs of the new expansion, but equally, if you feel like your collection isn't filled enough with the really foundational cards that you're finding you need a lot of, might be worth cracking a pack here and there. But overall, generally the payoff on waiting will be quite good as long as you have the collection to support it. I hope that makes sense. I know it's more complicated than a really simple answer, but it boils down to if you've got a broad enough collection at the minute that you feel confident, then it's probably worth saving up. And in my opinion, I definitely wouldn't be spending wildcards until the new expansion drops. Unless there's some random thing that you just desperately need. I'd hold on to them because they give us access to the cards we want, not just random cards. This does lead on to the next question, which is, if we are buying packs, should we be just buying Winter War before it becomes harder to get? So first of all, probably worth a bit of an explanation here as to why this is even a relevant question. So Cards operates a very particular way of effectively what we would call booster pack rotation. Unlike some other games, Cards only has one active current pack set, as in one active expansion. So currently in the store you can buy Winter War or you can buy Core. Winter War is every card that was released in Winter War, and this is a very important one, every card that returned from rotation in Winter War come in Winter War packs. Core is everything else, every other live card in the game. So it's a much bigger pool than Winter War, which means that you're less likely to get the cards that you want. Because bigger pool, more cards to randomly choose from. When Covert Operations drops, the exact same thing will happen. Covert Operations packs will contain the new cards from Covert Operations and the packs returning to the game, cards rather, returning to the game from rotation. Really weird, the second half of that, because you would think that they'd be packaged in with whatever the original expansion that they came out with is, but they're not. Returning cards are packaged with the current, as it were, live expansion, which will be Covert Operations rotation. So that's why the question is, do you go for Winter War now, before those cards all fall into the core pool and become harder to get a hold of? Now, if you could only get access to booster packs, I would always, like packs of cards, random packs of cards, I would almost certainly say that it's probably worth having a look at that, because there are some good cards in Winter War. But it's also important to note that we have wild cards available, so unless you are really, really missing out on stuff, like you've got virtually nothing from Winter War, it might be worth holding off. But holding off has another price. Holding back gold and stuff like that has another potential opportunity cost, which feeds into, again, these are a very well organized set of questions. Kudos to Von Squirty. I didn't have to reorganize these. They've been thought of in a very careful order, as far as I can tell. This leads into the question about crate farming and is it a good plan? So first of all, what's crate farming? You will be familiar, I would imagine, with the crate system, which is that every week you get to open a crate, depending on how much crate experience you have gained, which is primarily gained through nation levels and opening packs of cards in the previous week. The level of crate you open will be different. Equally, if you have a battle pass, it will be upgraded by one stage to a maximum of the elite crate. This is a great source of wildcards. Crate farming, the concept of, is keeping packs or buying packs with gold and opening them before your crate rotates to boost your crate to a higher level. Now, it is something you can do, but it is quite difficult to do well, and it is also quite counterintuitive. And I don't often say this because I am a big fan of efficiency and effective ways of doing things. It also is kind of unfun. Saving up all of your gold and not being able to open up anything new because you're waiting and waiting and waiting to boost your crate, and then it just all becomes... It doesn't remind me of my days, going down to my local newsagents and picking up a couple of booster packs for the game that I was playing at the time, cracking them open and looking at the cards, because that's the excitement. But there is an argument for it if you are particularly wanting wildcards. I will also say, though, that it is quite weighty. You're going to need to open a fair old chunk of packs, whether they be standard packs or officer packs. I believe officer packs are slightly slower on the whole, but there's not much in it the last time I looked, and I don't have current numbers on it. Your mileage may vary, and you can ask around and people will be able to tell you what they're getting. But it can be an option, but the opportunity cost, of course, is that you are limiting your game. But consider it, especially if you do want to get the occasional boost to an elite crate to get some elite wildcards ready. Can be worth thinking about, and is another use of your gold. But of course, any gold that you're spending doing this is going to limit what you have available to buy packs for the new expansion. Equally, when you are buying packs for the new expansion, of course, if you're opening loads of them at once, you run the risk of filling your crate to elite level very quickly, and then just playing lots and lots of games which aren't gaining you anything. It's an imperfect system. A lot of discussion has been had about whether there are ways that we can change it or not, and if anyone at 1939 wants to reach out to me, I would go into more detailed discussion about different ways that it could be done, because there is a balance between monetization, which is a necessary part of keeping a game alive, and also keeping things fun for newer players. Your mileage may vary. I personally am of the opinion it's not world-breakingly important which way round you choose to do things. My main piece of advice would be pick a strategy that you're comfortable with and stick to it, and go one way or the other. Don't try and get the best of both worlds, because then you'll end up kind of getting not quite enough of both. The final question is probably the biggest question, and also leads into a lot of my content and its value, which is what decks to be playing. So the actual full context of this question, I've shortened it for here, is for a newer player, what deck should they be playing to be at the right level? Should they still be playing the old reliable decks that have been recommended as new player decks for a long time, and in particular are recommended by me on my YouTube channel, and are staples of the game, but are losing some of their cards in the next expansion, and there might be some changes and alterations, and is there a way? Is it better to keep doing that, or should you be kind of trying to get your head around the potential for newer styles of decks? So, my answer here is, the short version is, it is definitely still worth learning the fundamental decks. In particular, learning to pilot core decks, core aggro decks, core mid-range decks, and core control decks is not going to harm your ability to play this game, because even if new variants on those archetypes come out, and they inevitably will, the core of those archetypes will still be in the game. Aggro decks are still going to aggro, mid-range is still going to mid-range, and control is still going to control. And the decks that have been posited, particularly on my YouTube channel, are worth learning on. Some caveats. Do not, under any circumstances, craft, using wildcards, any card which is leaving in rotation. I give this warning a lot, and I really want to emphasize it because it's a mistake I don't want to see people make. When you get the crafting option for a card, it will actually tell you on screen. It will say, warning, this card is leaving in the next rotation. If it does, don't craft it. It's not worth it. The decks are going to change a bit Now, what I can tell you is if you are a follower and a fan of my starter decks and methodology, I will be updating those decks and strategies for the new expansion as soon as I am practically able to do. Now, I say as soon as I'm practically able to do, because that is going to depend on a number of things. One of those is when I have access to the necessary information to replan and make changes, because the 0 level and level 12 decks, your starter decks and level 12 decks as they are now, while yours will remain the same, you've already opened them and done them and moved on, a newer player starting after the new expansion is going to see different decks, because several cards, in fact, there isn't a single one of those 10 decks that doesn't see a change in card content. I don't know what those changes are yet. I have politely asked 1939 if they'll give me some upfront advice, maybe let me know in advance what those lists might look like and what the substitutions are. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Maybe they're comfortable, maybe they're not. I have no influence, and if they do, it will make my job quicker. If they don't, it will depend on what I need to do to be able to access that pool as to how quickly I can update my content. As an example, the last time changes to the new player experience happened, I started a completely fresh account as an alternate account and played through 12 levels of every nation, that is 60 levels of nations, as fast as I possibly could without spending money, because it's expensive to buy all the medkits needed to boost the progression, to get the starter and level 12 decks, to then make sure I made sure that that fitted correctly, and to update to the latest version, which is on YouTube, of my bootcamp for new players. My intent is to do something very similar for the new expansion. How long that takes will depend on what's available to me, and that's just something I can't tell you beyond it is going to happen. And there will probably be some snapshot videos where I just give you my best guess substitutions to keep you going for a while on those decks until I can get more detailed answers. Equally, my more detailed deck guides will take longer to update because I will have to wait, as will all of the more competitive or detail-oriented players, to see the new meta actually shape out over 1 or 2 seasons of play and competition before we can really say much of anything about where everything balances out. So there'll be a little bit of Wild West, but I am going to be here as a constant presence as much as I can be to give advice and go through it. And there are lots of different ways that I can do that. Obviously, I'm going to be doing video content, but equally, if you want to actually be able to ask questions about this and get relatively quicker answers, you are more than welcome to please use the link in the comments, the link in the description. Join my Discord, and you can ask me there. You can ask a lot. It's a Discord populated by many people who are newer players who want to learn stuff, but also populated by lots of very friendly people who've been playing this game a long time and are very, very good at it. So you'll be able to get good advice, even if it's not from me. I hope this is helpful in getting people prepared enough to balance out the excitement and the slight overwhelm of all of the new stuff. I'm very aware that Covert Operations is adding a lot of new mechanics and keywords and ideas and concepts that can seem, on the face of it, very overwhelming. But it's also just really exciting because we're going to have lots of new design space. As always, this is just my best opinion. It's imperfect. I'm not going to get everything right. I am not as omniscient as I wish I was about the game. I hope this advice is useful to you. I hope it will help you to be more prepared for the new expansion, and I hope, therefore, that you can relax a bit and share my excitement and dive into all of the stuff that's being talked about the new expansion, and more card reveals will be coming soon. As always, stay well, stay good, humans, and I will catch you next time.